Please listen to the entire story, comment, subscribe, and press the bell icon. This story is about a shocking truth regarding human cloning revealed in the films and a sinister organization's plot to manipulate reality. He must choose, but can he tell real from copy, or is he already a pawn in someone else's twisted game? Let's start. Rain lashed against the dusty windowpane, blurring the neon glow of the open sign outside the pawn shop. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of mothballs and desperation. I was the latter, knuckles white on the counter, pushing forward a worn leather case. "Old projector," I rasped, voice hoarse from the storm. Mr. Crowley, a man whose skin seemed permanently sallow, barely glanced at it. "Celluloid's deader than your grandma. Can't even sell the film anymore. It's not for selling," I insisted, voice trembling. "Just a pawn. Need enough for a room tonight." He finally looked up, skepticism etched in his one visible eye. The other was obscured by a greasy black patch. "What's on it?" "Just some old home movies. Nothing valuable." A lie, heavy and metallic, sat on my tongue. He squinted at the case for a beat longer, then picked it up, his touch surprisingly gentle. "One night. $50. Relief washed over me like a warm wave. I grabbed the crumpled bills and stumbled into the rain, the case tucked safely under my arm. Back in the dingy motel room, the projector whirred to life, casting flickering shadows on the wall. The first film was banal: birthday parties, family picnics. But then, the scene shifted. A dark alley, a struggle, a man's face contorted in fear. A glint of metal, a muffled scream, the screen going dark, my heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't home movies. This was a murder. I fumbled for the next reel, hands shaking. This one showed a well-kept office, a man with slick back hair sitting behind a mahogany desk. He wasn't looking at the camera. But I recognized him instantly, Mr. Crowley. Then, the door swung open and the man from the alleyway walked in. He held a gun, pointed directly at Crowley. Their conversation, muffled but intense, played out. An accusation, a denial, then a struggle that knocked the camera over. The screen went black again. I sat there, numb, the projector whirring uselessly. The man in the alleyway was dead. Mr. Crowley was implicated. My blood ran cold. What had I gotten myself into? Suddenly, a rap at the door. Heart pounding, I fumbled for the switch, plunging the room into darkness. The knocking grew more insistent, a low voice calling out, "Police, open up." I knew I couldn't hide. With a deep breath, I reached for the doorknob, the projector still humming in the silence, casting long, twisted shadows from the forgotten films on the wall. The future, uncertain and terrifying, stretched before me, like a film reel waiting to be played. My hand trembled on the doorknob, the weight of the projector case heavy in my hand. The steady drone of police voices, muffled through the thin motel door, amplified my fear. "Open up. We have a warrant." Taking a shaky breath, I undid the latch. Two officers stood outside, rain dripping from their slickers. One, a woman with a stern gaze, flashed a badge. "Mr. Evans," I could only nod, throat constricting. "We received an anonymous tip about a possible homicide caught on film in your room." My stomach churned. "Homicide? I don't know anything about that." The other officer, a burly man with a thick mustache, pushed past me, his eyes scanning the room. He spotted the projector whirring ominously on the table, the empty film tray a stark accusation. "What's this?" he grunted, reaching for it. "Just old movies," I stammered, desperately searching for an explanation. "Hold it," the woman interjected, stepping between us. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the scene, the projector, the discarded film case, the terror etched on my face. As they secured the projector and film as evidence, my mind raced. I had stumbled into a web of secrets, one that tied a pawnshop owner with a dark past and a man who met a violent end. But who had sent the tip? And why me? Later, at the police station, they questioned me for hours. It felt like an eternity under the harsh fluorescent lights, every detail of the film scrutinized, every lie I told scraping against my conscience. In the end, they let me go, citing lack of evidence. But their words held a chilling promise. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Evans. If anything comes up, we know where to find you." Back in the dingy motel room, the silence weighed heavily. The projector stood dormant, a silent witness to the horror it had revealed. I had escaped the immediate threat, but the shadows remained. The questions gnawed at me. Who killed the man? Why was Mr. Crowley involved? And who sent the tip, pulling me into their twisted game? The answer, like the remaining films in the case, remained unseen, lurking in the darkness, waiting to be unraveled. The night stretched on, and I knew it was only the beginning. The projector stood as a grim reminder, a chilling symbol of the secrets it held and the terrifying truth it could unleash. Days blurred into weeks. The police kept a watchful eye, their visits becoming a new kind of storm I weathered. Sleep became a stranger, replaced by a constant gnawing fear. The empty film case on the table seemed to mock me, a constant reminder of the missing pieces, the unanswered questions. Then, a package arrived. No return address, just my name scrawled in a messy hand. Inside lay another film reel, the celluloid warped and dusty with age. I stared at it, a tremor running through my body. This couldn't be good. Against my better judgment, I pulled out the projector, the familiar whirring sound echoing in the silence of the room. The film flickered to life, a grainy black and white scene unfolding. It showed a dimly lit room, the same office from the previous film. Mr. Crowley sat behind the desk, his face etched with a mixture of fear and defiance, but this time, he wasn't alone. Another man stood across from him, his back to the camera. He spoke, his voice distorted and raspy, issuing veiled threats laced with a chilling familiarity. As the man turned, a shock of recognition ripped through me. It was me. The recording abruptly ended. I sat there, frozen, the projector humming ominously. The man in the film, the one threatening Mr. Crowley, looked exactly like me, down to the faint scar above his left eyebrow. Was it a deep fake? An elaborate setup? Or something far more sinister? My mind reeled, the line between reality and fabrication blurring. Suddenly, the phone rang, its shrill peal shattering the eerie silence. A single word, spoken in the same raspy voice from the film, sent chills down my spine. "Run." I scrambled for my things, the phone call echoing in my head. My reflection in the mirror seemed different, the fear in my eyes mirroring the fear in the film. I didn't know who to trust, who to run from, or even what I was running from. As I slipped out into the night, the city lights blurring into streaks of yellow, the question remained, was I the victim, or the next player in this terrifying game? I sprinted through the city, the echo of my own voice screaming, "Run," in my head. My bag felt heavy, the projector case bumping against my hip like a mocking reminder of the rabbit hole I'd fallen down. The police, the cryptic films, the doppelganger, it was all too much. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat, every face a potential enemy. Seeking refuge in a deserted alleyway, I slumped against the damp brick wall, gasping for breath. My phone buzzed again, displaying the same unknown number. This time, it wasn't a word, but a single image, a grainy photograph of me, standing outside the pawn shop, the projector case tucked under my arm, panic clawed at my throat. They knew where I was. They knew everything. But who were they? Why were they manipulating me? Was I being framed for something I didn't do? Or was the truth far more disturbing, something so horrifying I couldn't even contemplate it? Suddenly, a flicker of movement at the other end of the alleyway caught my eye. A figure emerged from the darkness, shrouded in shadows. As it moved closer, a familiar outline became discernible, the silhouette of the man from the film, my doppelganger. He stopped a few feet away, his face obscured by the darkness. His voice, though distorted, echoed with a chilling calmness. There was nowhere else to run, was there? He took a slow step forward, and in that moment, I realized the truth. This wasn't a game, not anymore. This was a fight for survival, My hand instinctively went for the pocket where I kept my keys, the sharp edge digging into my palm. But before I could react, another figure stepped out of the shadows, the harsh street lamp illuminating their face. It was Mr. Crowley, his lone eye narrowed with a mix of fear and anger. He held a gun, pointed directly at my doppelganger. "It ends here," Mr. Crowley rasped, his voice trembling slightly. The two figures stood there, a silent standoff. I was frozen, caught in the crossfire of their unspoken conflict. Then, with a deafening bang, Mr. Crowley fired. The alleyway echoed with the gunshot, the sound bouncing off the brick walls. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact, but it never came. When I opened them, I couldn't believe my eyes. My doppelganger stood motionless, a single red stain blossoming on his chest. Mr. Crowley lowered the gun, his face pale and drawn. He turned to me, his voice barely a whisper. "Run," he said, his words echoing the call on the phone. Without hesitation, I sprinted away, the image of the fallen figure and the frantic look on Mr. Crowley's face seared into my memory. I didn't know where I was going, or what awaited me at the end of this dark path, but one thing was clear: the nightmare wasn't over. The secrets hidden within the films, and the unseen players pulling the strings, were still out there. And I, the unwitting pawn in their twisted game, was left to navigate a reality where truth was a shifting mirage and days turned into weeks, then months. The city became my labyrinth, a concrete jungle where every corner seemed to hold a hidden threat. I lived off the grid, constantly moving, the projector case my sole companion and the source of both my fear and, strangely, a flicker of hope. The remaining films held the key, I knew it. But each viewing felt like chipping away at my sanity. One reel showed a clandestine meeting in a deserted warehouse, two shadowy figures exchanging a briefcase filled with cash. Another depicted a sprawling mansion nestled amidst rolling hills, its windows radiating a warm, inviting glow. My gut told me it was a place of secrets, not refuge. Then came the final film. It was short, grainy, and seemed to hold the key to everything. It showed a dimly lit laboratory, rows of gleaming equipment lining the walls. A lone scientist, his face obscured by a surgical mask, stood over a metallic table. On the table lay a body, the man from the alleyway, my doppelganger. But this time, something was different. His chest was open, wires snaking out from a metallic implant embedded within. The scientist spoke, his voice distorted by a voice modulator, but the words jolted me awake. Experiment X-13 successful. Subject replication achieved. The film ended abruptly, plunging me back into darkness. I sat there, trembling, the weight of the revelation crushing me. My doppelganger wasn't real. He was a copy, a synthetic replica created by an unknown entity for an unknown purpose. But who were they? And what was their connection to Mr. Crowley? Suddenly, a news alert flashed on my phone: fire engulfs abandoned warehouse, cause unknown. The report sent a shiver down my spine. It was the same warehouse from one of the films. Had someone seen the footage? Were they trying to destroy the evidence? Driven by a desperate need for answers, I decided to take a risk. I contacted the reporter who wrote the article, using a burner phone and a pseudonym. We arranged to meet at a dimly lit diner on the outskirts of the city. The reporter, a young woman with inquisitive eyes, listened intently as I recounted my story, the projector case resting on the table between us. As I finished, she leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper: "I believe you. But uncovering the truth could be dangerous. Are you sure you want to do this?" I looked into her eyes, the reflection of my own fear staring back. The question hung heavy in the air. Was I ready to face the unknown, the entity behind the films, the truth about who I was and the purpose for my existence? I took a deep breath, the echo of my voice in the alleyway ringing in my ears: "Run." But this time, it was different. This time, I wouldn't run. I would fight. "Yes," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor within, "I'm sure." The game had changed. I was no longer just a pawn. The hunt was on. The audience eagerly waits. Will you join me as I delve deeper into the darkness, seeking answers even as the shadows close in? We embarked on a clandestine investigation, piecing together the puzzle. The reporter, whose name was Sarah, had connections in the city's underbelly. She unearthed whispers of a clandestine organization, Project Genesis, rumored to be experimenting with cloning technology. The news reports about the fire were a stroke of luck. The authorities had recovered data chips from the wreckage, one containing a familiar face, Mr. Crowley. It depicted him entering the warehouse just before the fire. We tracked him down to a cheap motel on the city's fringe. He was a shadow of his former self, paranoia etched on his face. He confirmed our suspicions about Project Genesis, confessing his involvement in a desperate attempt to get his deceased daughter back. They used him as a pawn, manipulating his grief. Promising him a clone in exchange for his silence, the final film in the case held the key to their location, a secluded island, a hidden facility. Sarah and I devised a plan, leveraging the reporter's connections and Crowley's desperation for a potential whistleblower. The journey was fraught with danger. Infiltrating the island was like stepping into a dystopian nightmare. Sterile corridors, rows of identical figures, the omnipresent feeling of being watched. We found their lab, a chilling testament to their science. But more importantly, we found them. The scientists, led by a woman with piercing blue eyes, were unfazed by our arrival. They saw us as nothing more than a minor inconvenience. It was in that moment, as they laid out their twisted vision for a future controlled by them, that I realized the full scope of their ambition. They weren't just creating clones, they were creating an army. And I, unknowingly, might be just another piece on their chessboard. A struggle ensued, the sounds of chaos echoing through the sterile halls. Sarah and Crowley fought with the desperation of cornered animals, while I grappled for the control panel, my fingers fumbling over the buttons. Suddenly, a voice filled the room, emanating from unseen speakers. It was the leader, her voice laced with chilling calmness. "Congratulations," she said, "you've reached our final test." A test of choice. The room plunged into darkness. When my eyes adjusted, I saw a sight that sent chills down my spine. Standing in a row, their faces mirroring my own, were 5 identical copies of me. "Choose," the voice echoed, "which one of you is the original?" My heart hammered in my chest. The room was silent, the weight of the impossible choice hanging heavy in the air. I looked at my reflections, their eyes filled with uncertainty and fear. Which one of us was real? Was any of us real? The story ends here, leaving the audience teetering on the edge of a terrifying truth. Who is the real you? Does free will exist in a world where individuals can be replicated? The answer remains elusive, a chilling reminder that the future hangs precariously in the balance.